That comes to the close of our announcements. We're so excited for everything that's going on in the community, and we want to welcome you to be a part of that. So now we're going to transition to kind of preparing our hearts and minds for the sermon today. Our fantastic Pastor Donia is going to be giving the sermon today about kind of putting our faith into action, and what does that look like of faith and reality, right? A lot of the times people say, you go to church and you're one person, and then during the week you're a different person, right? And Pastor Donia is going to be talking a lot more about how do you integrate that, right? How do you live by your morals and values and naturally share that with others? So I'm really excited for that, and it's concluding our sermon series with our last sermon today. So we're going to be having a short worship video here just to prepare yourself, and then Pastor Donia is going to come up and speak. Thank you.
My breath with every song I bring, an empty voice, a hollow noise. If I speak with a silver tongue, convince a crowd, but don't have love, I leave a bitter taste with every word I say. So let my life be the proof of your what you made of, how you lived, how you died, love the sacrifice. So let my life be the proof of your love. If I give to a needy soul but don't have love, then who is poor? It seems all the poverty is found in me. So let my life be the proof of your love. Let my love look like you and what you made of, how you lived, how you died, love the sacrifice. So let my life be the proof of your love. When it's all said and done, when we sing our final song, only love remains.
If I speak with human eloquence and angelic ecstasy, but don't love, I'm nothing but the creaking of a rusty gate. If I speak God's word with power, revealing all of his mysteries and making everything as plain as day, and if I have faith to say to a mountain, jump, and it jumps, but I don't love, I'm nothing. If I give all I own to the poor, or even go to the stake to be burned as a martyr, but I don't love, I've gotten nowhere. So, no matter what I say, no matter what I believe, no matter what I do, I'm bankrupt without love.
Let my life be the proof of your love. Let my love look like you and what you made of, how you lived, how you died, love the sacrifice. So let my life be the proof of your love.
Good morning. So wonderful to see all of you this morning. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed our band and our announcements and our music video. There's one announcement that we forgot, and it's a very important announcement. If you don't know yet, Mira Fleischer had her baby this May 31st. It was 3 weeks early, but perfectly healthy. I think they're coming home today. So there's name is coming. I think it was a bit of a surprise. So name is coming. We'll have pictures and a more formal announcement next Sunday, so you can all see how mom and baby are doing. But let's give one more round of applause for the Fleischer family. All right, so I really feel fortunate to be here today and fortunate to be with all of you. Today is our final sermon in our series about the value of our faith and sharing it with others. So whether or not you've been here in the past month or so, I'll just recap a little bit of what we've gone over so far. In the first 3 Sundays, we shared a little bit about what makes our faith unique. There's a lot of unique things and a lot of different faiths, but what do we have that is really valuable that we can share with other people? So actually, I'll just share the vision point with you. We have our vision statement in the back, and we've been doing series based on each point. And so this is the point that we've been on. We are sharing with the people of the Denver area truth that has been hidden in the Bible until now. God's original purpose of creation, how humanity fell away from God, and our path to returning to God's ideal and dream. And along with that, we own a beautiful and modern building that serves as the hub for all of our many family and faith-based activities going on throughout the week. And you may not know exactly how those 2 points fit together. They actually fit together amazingly well. Last week, Mike gave a presentation on our unveiling of our upcoming exterior renovations here for our church. And if you didn't get to see it, we've got it up on the stand at the back, a nice big, what's it called? Like a prototype of what it's going to look like. But what I really loved Mike's message last week. If you didn't hear it, you weren't here, I recommend finding it on YouTube or checking your emails and listening to it, because it actually tied together perfectly well this whole kind of internal aspect of what is our faith and what do we believe. But then he called it internal truth and external beauty, of how God created us in his image. And everything that God created is good, and that God had created is beautiful. And while we don't want to have a beautiful exterior and be empty inside, kind of like the song, if we do all these things, but we don't have love, I'm nothing but the clanging of an empty gong, that kind of thing, So that's not what we want. But if we have a beautiful truth, and we have a beautiful community and amazing relationships, then our whole environment should reflect that. So actually, our building is an expression of our faith as well. So it's really fantastic. I shared it on Facebook. I was like, this is the best. Anyway, but I'm wrapping this up today because, and similar to what Mike shared last week, we've gone over these different aspects about what was God's original purpose of creation? What was God's dream that he held in his mind as he created this world? What is God's hope for us? How humanity fell away from God? How do we get back to God? Even if we know these things in our mind, or if we examine them intellectually, if they don't show up in our life, if they don't show up in our reality, in our daily life, then what is the value of it? What is the value of our faith if it's not present in our life and our relationships? So, my topic for today is faith and reality. Because more important than the things that we say we believe, we really want to see the results of our faith. We want to see the results of our belief in our life. It was really interesting because I had picked this topic a while ago, and then this week I attended my last MOPS group for the school year. MOPS is Mothers of Preschoolers. It's a nationwide program, and they've been doing it for decades, and you can gather together with other moms of preschoolers. It's kind of a faith-based program, but it's really just kind of a support group for moms. You they have babysitting for your kids, so you don't have to deal with your kids. They have a nice, they provide food and some craft or something creative. And then there's always like a message or something that you can take value for your life. We've had topics like, what is technology's place in the family? Things like that. To be honest, I really just enjoy being with other moms. But this week, we had a very interesting presentation. It was this lady who actually lives in Denver, and her job is to create materials for MOPS. So she's been, creating presentations and writing books and just been very involved in creating a support for mothers of preschoolers. And so she actually came to our presentation this week, and she has just written this book called Loving My Actual Neighbor. And there's a story that she told of why she wrote this book. And so I'm going to kind of retell her story a little bit. And it's a little bit heavy, but I think it actually really brings home how important it is that our faith is real, not just in our belief, but in our life. So she told this story of how she, a number of years ago, she already had this job. She was creating programs and presentation for MOPS. Her whole life was in taking care of her own preschoolers and in creating support for other preschoolers. And she lived in a neighborhood. It was a very varied neighborhood. She had some neighbors that she really liked and some neighbors that were a little different from her that she didn't relate to so well. There was a family who lived across the street from her. She had a number of children, but she didn't have so much of a relationship with them. She sometimes got irritated with them because they would play music late into loud, late at night, or she didn't always agree with the way that she saw her parenting her kids or something like that. It wasn't like a conscious, I don't like that person, but she didn't really take an opportunity to get to know them or say hi. And she came up from her basement one day and looked out the window, and she saw, and there was flashing lights everywhere. There was 20 police cars in the street and in the neighborhood, and policemen walking around, and she didn't know what was going on, but it seemed like whatever it was, the situation had already been finished. They weren't running. There wasn't a lockdown on the neighborhood or anything. And she wondered, what on earth has happened at my neighbor's house across the street? But then it hit her. I have absolutely no way to contact this mom and see if everything's okay. I don't even know her name. I don't have her phone number. I don't know her name. And there's absolutely nothing that I can do in support of this family. And she found out later through the news that actually the father had shaken the baby, and the baby had passed away. And it just hit her because her whole life is invested into supporting moms of preschoolers. And the closest mother of a preschooler in her physical vicinity, she had no way to support. And she realized that there was something out of line in what she believed, or what she said she believed, and the way that she lived in her life. I debated about sharing that story because it's hard to share. But I think that if we look at our own lives, maybe we haven't experienced something so shocking or eye-opening, but it sheds a little light onto how maybe there's aspects of our life that are not the way that we want them to be. she shared, so she wrote this book about loving my actual neighbor, and she began to practice these points that helped her to create relationships with all of her neighbors, even the ones that weren't so easy to get along with. And she said, maybe it wouldn't have made a difference. Maybe even if I had made effort, maybe this mom would have rejected me. Maybe if I had known this lady's number, I would have called her, and maybe she wouldn't have picked up. But there was something lacking on my part where I didn't even know how to try. So she shared this Bible verses. I'm going to share them with you. This is from Matthew chapter 22, verse 37 through 40. Jesus declared, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and prophets hang on these two commandments." We often talk about actually these two commandments of love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. But actually, I felt that this last little line here, all of the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments, it's actually very powerful. Because there are other things in life, right? There are other things that we should or shouldn't do. There are other rules, other laws, relationships. But this is the core. And without love for our heavenly parent, or without love for our neighbors, then the other things don't have much value. And then she shared these verses, Matthew 5, verses 38 through 48. "You have heard that it was said, 'Eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth.' But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. You have heard that it was said, 'Love your neighbor and hate your enemy.' But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? What makes you special? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Everybody greets somebody they love. Do not even the Gentiles do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect." And then on my phone, I have this little app that gives me a quote from Reverend Moon every day, and then I thought this fit in perfectly, so I'm going to share that one. What kind of person should we become? Become a person who lives on behalf of God, loving others the way God would. So her story, although I haven't had a similar experience, it reminded me of many of my own experiences, actually, with my own neighbors. How well do I love my actual neighbors? And especially those that are the most different from me. I could talk about the things that I'm proud of with my neighbors. I've really come to believe that this neighborhood is like my tribe. It's our church's community, but it's my community. But I'll also admit that there are some that play their music really loud late into the night. There are some that have a different lifestyle than me. There are some that have different parenting styles than the kinds that I feel like I want my kids to be around. Yeah, I can think of many experiences that I'm proud of, but there's more than a few that I can't really be proud of, actually. So, it really made me think about that. But beyond the neighbor part of this whole story, the bigger message that I got was, does my life line up with the things that I say I believe in? And I could, similar to my neighbors, I could point out all the ways in which it does. But if I look closely, and if I'm really honest with myself, there are a lot of areas of improvement. In the way that I respond to my children when they're really whiny, or in the ways that I prioritize my time, right? We can say one thing. We talked about this before in our dominion of time, and how we spend our time is actually a reflection of our priorities. So if I spend 3 hours on my phone over the course of a day, but I spend 15 minutes talking to my husband, even though I say family is the most important thing to me, what does the spending of my time actually show? It's very telling. Just my way of being when I'm out and about. I've noticed in myself that a lot of times when I'm in the grocery store, I like to have my daughter with me. Because if I have my daughter with me, then all my attention can just be on getting the groceries I need, and on making sure that my daughter doesn't fall out of the cart or eat candy out of the bins, and I don't really have to look the cashier in the eye, or I don't really have to say excuse me or make conversation with the other person who's getting a coffee sample at Sprouts. It's not something that's bad, but it's also not the way that I really want to live my life. I don't believe that that is how God would relate with people. If he was a person, he would relate with each person he came into contact with. And so even that is a way where I realize I am not living in alignment with the way that I say I believe I should be. There's a lot of room for improvement when I choose to be comfortable rather than choosing to be vulnerable. And I could say, well, we're pastors. Actually, in some ways I could point out, I've built my whole life around living for God and living for my community and being a good person. We've built a whole structure, our whole life, our whole framework is structured for that. But even within that structure, there's a lot of spaces I can find to be selfish. Maybe you can relate to that. So, does my life line up with the things I say I believe in? Or another way to put that is, do I actually really believe the things I say I believe in? Because actually, everything we do is a reflection of our true belief system, our internal belief system. If I say something unkind to my husband, or if I look at somebody else and I have judgmental thoughts towards them, and I feel justified in saying that thing to my husband, or I feel justified in my judgmental thoughts, then there is something inside of myself. There's something in my internal belief system that says it's okay to do that. That's actually what I really believe, despite what I might want to believe. So to act in a way that is consistent with what we want to believe, to actually bring our faith into reality, is a process. And it takes practice. Now, I'm not saying that you can't have a big transformation in your life and change a lot of things really quickly. Actually, I've seen it happen many times. When people meet God or meet Jesus, or they have a transformational experience in their family. Maybe you've had some of those experiences yourself. I do believe in transformational experiences. But even then, it still takes the effort and practice to maintain that lifestyle or a new belief system. So I find that when we're in an uncomfortable situation, when we experience this feeling of unrest, when we're in an uncomfortable feeling, it's often because we're not living in line with our values that we want to live in line with. So I have a few points of just ways that can help us to recognize those moments and to take a new action and to actually begin to live our life in line with our faith, right? So the first one I have is to allow for humility. Allowing for the possibility that I might not always be right. Also allowing the possibility that actually God wants to give us teachable moments. And so when I'm uncomfortable, or if I feel judgmental, or if I feel that something is not the way that I want it to be, if something in myself is not the way that I want it to be, rather than trying to find a way for it to be okay and for me to be right, maybe just pause for a minute and allow that maybe I'm not always right. Maybe there's something bigger at play here than my own personal desires or my own personal perspective of this situation. I do really believe that however uncomfortable they are, these uncomfortable moments that we experience are the times that God, that's like a little open door where God can say, hey, this is a teachable moment. You can grow here. And God gives us these moments so we can continually grow. The next one I have, and this is bad grammar, I'm sure. Stand in the awkward. So what does that mean? Do you sometimes have awkward moments? Maybe when you're in a conversation with somebody and they say something that you didn't expect them to say, and maybe it's a little off-putting. Or maybe you said hi to them and they didn't say hi back. I find when I'm in that situation, I immediately want it to feel not awkward. So that could be changing the topic. It could be, well, they didn't say hi, so I'm just going to go this way, focus on somebody else. We tend to want to get rid of the uncomfortable feeling immediately, ASAP. By either leaving the uncomfortable situation, even if it's just thinking about something else. I often find also that when I'm in maybe I'm in like a social setting where I don't exactly feel comfortable, or maybe I can't really relate so well to the conversation that's happening, I kind of want to distract myself, so I go to my cell phone. Or sometimes we go to something to eat. Chocolate makes everything better. Don't we tend to do those things when we feel uncomfortable? But instead, I propose the idea that maybe instead of immediately trying to remove ourselves from an uncomfortable situation, maybe we could just stand there for an extra minute and experience the awkwardness, experience being a little bit uncomfortable. Because that is when you have a moment to ask yourself, why do I feel uncomfortable right now? Is it because of the other person? Is it because of myself? Is it because my expectations are too high, they're not being met? Is it because I should actually have done something more gracious and I didn't do that? And so I feel ashamed or embarrassed? And in that moment, it gives you an opportunity to ask yourself if there's anything different that we could do right now. So I have a little story to share about this. Last summer, we had the experience of a couple of our bikes being stolen from our courtyard here. And we didn't know at first who did it. We had nobody had ever come into our courtyard and taken anything. We had carelessly left things outside and they'd been picked up by other people, but nobody had come in and stolen something from us before. Eventually we actually found out who it was, a couple of neighborhood kids, and it was very interesting to have a face to the person who'd done something to you. And initially we had thought, well, maybe it's some homeless people, maybe somebody's, going around the neighborhood stealing bikes and reselling the bike. Didn't really expect them to be kids. And they're neighborhood kids, so I still see them all the time, and I realized that was the case. So one day, a couple weeks after our bikes had been stolen, I was at the park right behind here with my kids, and I noticed one of these boys, and he was pushing a little kid on the swings. And Annalise was like, I want to go swing! I want to swing! So that's her favorite thing to do. So I was like, oh, okay, let's go swing. And so I'm here pushing Annalise on the swing next to the little boy who stole our bikes, pushing somebody on the swings. I can tell you it feels a little bit awkward. And I was like, first of all, I was like, well, I could just not, maybe we could do something else, Annalise. I was thinking, maybe we should do something else. I don't want to be there. It's an uncomfortable place to be. But then we did it. We went and pushed. And then I was thinking, well, I could just ignore him and continue pushing. But Mike and I had talked about it, and we really felt like, if at all possible, if there's a teachable moment here, let's talk to these kids. So I was like, okay, here's my moment. So I was like, hey, I think you stole our bikes a couple weeks ago. I won't repeat what he said back to me. I don't know exactly what he experienced, but what I perceived as what he experienced was, first of all, shock that we knew what had happened. Second of all, fear that we would tell the police or get him in trouble or send him to juvie or, that kind of thing. And so then there was all this blustery resistance and accusation, and how do you know what I did? And then trying to get his friends to back him up and everything. And in that moment was very awkward too. I really wanted to leave, but I was pushing my daughter and he was pushing his friend's kid. And so we're still sitting there pushing our kids next to each other. And then I said something like, what did I say? It was something like, well, if you didn't do it, I don't want to accuse you wrongly. But if you did, either way, I don't want to feel like that there's something, between us where I hate you because you stole our bikes and because you hate me because I said so. And we kind of just had this little, every couple minutes we'd say something to each other. We're pushing. And I asked him his name, and I don't know if he told me his real name or not, but we started to have a conversation. I was like, so who's this kid? And he was like, oh, it's, our families live together, and this is kind of like my nephew, and we just started, he kind of, his temper kind of calmed down, and we started having a real conversation, and even his friends were like, dude, she's not trying to like kill you or anything, like, and he was like, okay. And so, and it was incredibly, incredibly awkward. But I just stood there and I accepted the awkwardness, and we created something. I don't say we're not like best friends, but he comes and he plays basketball on our hoop sometimes. I'm like, hey. He's like, hey. But there's something different there. If we're just willing to stand in an uncomfortable situation, see what's there, and maybe create something different. So that leads into my third point, which is take a new action. Because we are people of habit. As much as we like to think that autopilot isn't driving our lives, how much do you think about the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning? Whether it's brushing your teeth, whether it's looking at your phone, whether it's getting dressed, are we really present and conscious in most of our daily actions? Not so much. Or at least I'm not. And even in not mundane situations, like when my kids say something, when my kids say this, I automatically say that. When someone cuts me off in traffic, what's your go-to phrase? Don't you usually say the same thing every time? When I feel like I don't fit in, then I turn to my phone. It's just like there's little habits, responses that we do that we don't even think about. It's not even conscious. But when we feel uncomfortable or are confronted, then these are the teachable moments. These are the moments when we can pause, examine what is making me uncomfortable, why am I feeling uncomfortable, and maybe do something different. Honestly, I usually do my habit response, and then I realize I did my habit response, and then I try to do something different. I'm very bad at catching myself in the moment. Usually my kids will, meh, 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 and I'll be like, just be quiet. And I'll be like, oh, okay, wait a sec. I'm sorry, guys. I didn't really mean that. Or if somebody cuts me off in traffic, I still usually do my usual response. But then I'm like, okay, I forgive you. Maybe you're having a bad day, And we don't get it right all the time. None of us is perfect. We all have our habits. We all make our mistakes. But these moments, when we are uncomfortable, I really believe that these are the best teachable moments for God to show us how we can align our lives to the beliefs that we want to live our life by. How else are we going to do it? A lot of times I just want to be like, I just love everybody, and I just expect myself to love everybody. That doesn't work. I want to be giving to everybody. But are we just always giving to everybody? It's in the moments where we hit our limitations with that we then have a moment to learn and to grow. These are the moments that are reminders to us of how we are designed to live in harmony with our beliefs. We're uncomfortable for a reason. It's that, what's it called, cognitive dissonance, right? Where we're not in line with what we really believe to be true. These are the moments that our faith can be expressed in reality. So I just have a couple of quotes to finish with. This is James 2, verses 14 through 17 and 26. What does it profit, my brethren, if someone says he has faith but does not have works, can faith save him? If a brother or sister is naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you says to them, "Depart in peace, be warmed and filled," but you do not give them the things which are needed for the body, what does it profit? Thus also, faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. For as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also. And then I have one more quote. This is from Reverend Moon, our founder. In the past, ideological systems ended up with only ideals. But now our belief system will bear fruit in actual reality. Therefore, a life of faith can be a life of reality. So as we finish up our series on the uniqueness of our faith, the value of our faith, and sharing that with others, please remember that it's not just the things that we say we believe or the words that we tell others, but the actions that we take in our life, especially in those moments when we just want to escape from them, that we actually have the opportunity to put our faith into action. So please join me in prayer. Most beloved Heavenly Parent, good morning. Thank you so much for such a beautiful, sunshiny Sunday morning. I'm so grateful for all of our brothers and sisters, families who came together here today. God, I know that you feel love and gratitude to them for being willing to come and open up their hearts to you and find what it is that you are speaking into our lives today. Heavenly Parent, I pray that each person can leave with something new today. And even if we felt a little bit confronted today, that we can take a moment to look at that and ask ourselves why. And as we step out of the church today and we go into our lives, our real lives, our actual lives, that when we find ourselves being confronted with ourselves, we can take a moment and see what it is that you might be teaching us in that moment. God, thank you so much for your love for us. Thank you for your patience with us. Many times we'll fail. Many times we look back and regret on the things that we should have said or should have done, that we did wrong. But I pray that we can just know that you understand our hearts. You know where we came from. You know why we do the things we do and say the things we say. You love us anyway, but you're calling us next time to be a bigger person and to reflect you a little bit more into this world. God, thank you so much for this day. We want to offer this service, this fellowship to you. And I offer this prayer in my name, Michael and Adonia Henschrick, a blessing to your family. Amen and adieu. Thank you.